Sometimes I think about the moments in life when someone tries to warn us about something, and we convince ourselves they're exaggerating. I've done that more times than I can count. Once, a friend told me that the quiet people are the ones you should pay the most attention to. I laughed it off, only to realize later that she was painfully right. Maybe that's why this story hit me differently when I heard it. It felt like one of those reminders life gives us, those whispers before the storm that we decide not to listen to. And that's what happened to Emily. When she first met Daniel, she thought she had finally stumbled into the kind of love people spent years searching for. I remember the way she told the story the first time, almost embarrassed at how naive she had been, but still holding on to the softness of those memories. Emily wasn't the type to fall too quickly, but something about Daniel made her feel safe, protected, seen. That's how it always begins, I guess. With the illusion of safety, Daniel had that charm that made people lean in. Not loud, not showy, just controlled. The kind of person who speaks softly but somehow makes their voice the center of the room. Emily liked that. After years of dating men who acted like performers, Daniel felt like a quiet harbor. So it didn't take long before she began spending nearly every day with him. Dinners, walks, nights talking until sunrise. He was attentive, always curious about her feelings, always asking how her day had been. She thought it was sweet, everyone did. Except for one person, his mother. Emily met her about 4 months into the relationship. They were having dinner at Daniel's childhood home. A cozy place with pale yellow walls and family photos arranged too carefully to feel spontaneous. His mother, Diane, had a softness in her eyes, the kind people get after a lifetime of carrying heavy things. She greeted Emily with a warm hug, but there was something in that embrace, like she was searching for something. Maybe strength, maybe answers, maybe hope. Throughout dinner, Diane studied her. Not rudely, not obviously, but deeply. Emily noticed, though she tried to ignore it. The meal tasted amazing, roasted chicken with herbs, vegetables cooked to perfection, but the atmosphere had a weight to it, as if the house itself was holding its breath. After dinner, while Daniel went to the kitchen, Diane placed a hand on Emily's arm. Her touch was gentle, but her voice shook just enough to make Emily straighten in her chair. "Be careful with my son," she said quietly. "He isn't always who he appears to be." Emily froze. She didn't know what to say. The warning came out of nowhere, like stepping into what you thought was shallow water, and suddenly sinking deeper than expected. She forced a confused smile, assuming Diane was being dramatic, or maybe protective to a fault. Mothers could be that way, especially with sons. But Diane's expression didn't change. Her eyes were full of something Emily wouldn't understand until much later: fear. Of course, Emily didn't listen. She brushed it off, told Daniel later that his mom seemed sweet but a bit intense. He laughed, shook his head, and kissed her forehead as if the whole thing were a misunderstanding. And for a while, it looked like she had been right to ignore the warning. Their relationship continued just as before, warm, affectionate, full of little moments that made Emily's heart swell. Daniel would bring her coffee in the mornings, leave handwritten notes in her bag, hold her like she was something precious. He had this way of making her feel chosen, protected, essential. Emily loved that feeling more than she admitted, but slowly things began to shift. It started with tiny comments, small criticisms disguised as concern. "You're too trusting, Em. People take advantage of you." Or, "You shouldn't wear that dress. It doesn't highlight your best features." Nothing aggressive, just subtle nudges that made her doubt herself in ways she never had before. Then came the questions: where she was going, who she was meeting, why she didn't text back fast enough. He never yelled. Daniel never raised his voice. But there was a sharpness in his tone that cut deeper than shouting ever could. Emily justified it as caring, as insecurity, as love that was maybe too intense. When she mentioned it to a friend, she laughed it off. "He's just protective," she said. "He worries." It's sweet, but it didn't feel sweet anymore. Especially when she started noticing things around his apartment. Papers he wouldn't let her touch. Locked drawers. A phone he always kept face down. Numbers and names she didn't recognize. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression would change. His eyes becoming cold, calculating, distant. One night, while Daniel was in the shower, his phone buzzed. Emily glanced at it without thinking. She didn't pick it up. She just looked. The message preview was from someone saved as C. It read, "She doesn't know anything yet." The water stopped. Panic rushed through her veins. She stepped back, pretending she hadn't seen anything, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he'd hear it. When he came out, he kissed her cheek like nothing was wrong. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, horribly off. She needed answers. Not confrontational ones. Emily wasn't reckless. But she started paying attention. Watching. Listening. She noticed the way he reacted when she mentioned certain topics. The way he always changed the subject when she asked about his past relationships. The way his mother's eyes seemed to fill with guilt whenever Emily visited. It all started stacking up inside her mind like puzzle pieces that didn't yet fit. One afternoon, Emily stopped by Diane's house unannounced. She told herself it was just to return a casserole dish. But really she needed something. Clarity. Reassurance. A sign that her uneasy instincts weren't a betrayal of the man she loved. Diane opened the door looking surprised but not upset. She invited Emily in, offered her tea, and sat across from her at the kitchen table. The room was bright, but the air felt heavy, thick with unsaid things. "Can I ask you something?" Emily finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Diane nodded slowly, her expression softening with a sadness that made Emily's throat tighten. "When you warned me about Daniel, what did you mean?" For a moment Diane didn't speak. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set her cup down. She looked at Emily with eyes full of a pain so old it had left permanent fingerprints on her soul. "I shouldn't have said anything," she murmured. "But I couldn't stop myself. I saw too much of the past in your eyes." Emily leaned forward. "What past?" Another long silence. Diane took a breath that sounded like it carried years of exhaustion. "He wasn't always like this," she began. "But he learned to be. He watched things no child should ever see. And sometimes pain repeats itself through generations." Emily felt a chill run up her spine. "What did he do?" Diane didn't answer. Instead she whispered, "You need to pay attention. And you need to be careful." Before Emily could respond, the front door opened. Daniel's voice echoed through the house. "Mom? I saw your car outside." His tone shifted when he saw Emily sitting at the table. Confusion, then concern, then something else, something sharper. "Emily? What are you doing here?" She forced a smile. "Just returning a dish." But he wasn't convinced. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted between her and his mother. For a split second, his face darkened with something cold and threatening. It vanished quickly, replaced by a tight smile. "You should have called," he said softly. "I would have come with you." Emily nodded, though something inside her twisted. Daniel kissed the top of her head in a gesture that felt more possessive than affectionate. On the drive home, he held her hand, thumb stroking circles against her skin. But his grip was too firm, too controlling, too rehearsed. That night, Emily barely slept. She kept seeing Diane's face, haunted, guilty, terrified. She kept hearing her whispered warning. She kept replaying the message from C on Daniel's phone. By morning, she had made a decision. She needed to find out what Daniel was hiding. She couldn't keep living with that sick feeling gnawing at her stomach. She started with small things, checking the dates on receipts left in his pockets, looking up the phone numbers she saw on his caller ID, paying attention to the way he reacted when certain names came up. She didn't find much at first, just inconsistencies, little cracks in the polished version of himself that Daniel always presented. But then she found something. A photograph. It was tucked inside an old book in his study, one she had picked up only because she thought it looked interesting. The photo was of Daniel with a woman Emily didn't recognize. The woman was smiling, leaning into him, Daniel's arm wrapped tightly around her waist. They looked close, more than close, but something about the picture felt wrong. Not because of the woman, but because Daniel looked different. Not younger, not happier, but colder. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His posture felt possessive, almost predatory. And the woman, there was writing on the back. Her name was Claire. Emily's breath caught in her throat. See, she heard footsteps behind her and nearly dropped the picture. Daniel walked into the room, drying his hands on a towel, eyes narrowing slightly when he saw what she was holding. "What's that?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. Emily swallowed hard. "Just a picture. I found it in the book." He reached out and took it from her hand with an ease that felt practiced. He didn't look at the picture. He just set it on the desk face down. "That's old," he said. "Doesn't matter anymore." But the way he said it made Emily's stomach knot. "Who is she?" she asked quietly. Daniel gave her a long, measured look. "Someone who left." There was a coldness in that sentence that made Emily step back without realizing it. Daniel noticed. His expression softened instantly, too instantly. He murmured, brushing a hand down her arm. "You're overthinking. Don't let my mother's nonsense get to you." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto something bigger than she understood. That night, she decided to visit Diane again. This time without telling Daniel. She waited until he fell asleep, his breathing even, his arm draped over her waist with a kind of heavy possessiveness that felt suffocating. When she finally slipped out of bed, her movements were slow, careful, terrified of waking him. Outside the air was cold. Her heart pounded loudly in her ears as she drove. Each passing street felt like she was crossing a line she could never return from. When Diane opened the door, she looked like she already knew why Emily was there. "I found a picture," Emily whispered. "A woman named Claire." The color drained from Diane's face. She stepped aside. "Come in." Emily did. And that was the moment everything truly began to unravel. Diane closed the door gently, as if afraid of being heard even though they were alone. She motioned for Emily to sit, her hands trembling as she poured tea none of them would drink. "It wasn't supposed to happen again," Diane murmured, her voice shaky. I hoped after Claire he would change." Emily felt her entire body go cold. What happened to her? Diane's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady, like someone reciting a story carved painfully into their bones. "She ran," she whispered. "But she didn't run fast enough." Emily's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" she choked out. Diane's voice cracked. "You need to run too." Before Emily could respond, before she could breathe, before she could make sense of the terror rising in her chest, there was a sharp knock on the door. A familiar voice called from outside. "Mom? Emily? I know you're in there." And the story breaks wide open. I've always believed that there are moments in life when the air itself tries to warn us. I've felt it before. A pressure in the chest, a silence too heavy, a sudden chill even on warm nights. When Emily later told me what happened behind that closed door, I couldn't help thinking about those moments in my own life when I ignored similar signs. When something inside me whispered, "This isn't right," but I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe that's why her story stayed with me all this time. Because on that night, the air wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating. Inside Diane's living room, Emily sat frozen as Daniel's voice echoed from the other side of the door. The sound carried a calmness that didn't match the situation. And that, more than anything, terrified her. Diane grabbed her hand under the table. "Don't move," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel knocked again, slower this time. Measured. Controlled. "Mom, open the door." The doorknob rattled. Diane sucked in a breath. Emily's heart hammered so loudly she was sure the whole house could hear it. Her throat felt dry, her hands icy despite the warm room. She didn't know what Daniel had heard, what he suspected, or why he was there, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was on the other side of that door was no longer the man she had fallen in love with. Diane stood up and walked toward the door. Emily grabbed her wrist. "Don't." "I have to," Diane whispered. "If I don't open it, he'll break it." Before Emily could respond, the door swung open. Daniel stood there, his expression unreadable, his eyes too calm for a man who just found his mother's door locked. He scanned the room, taking in the sight of Emily at the table. "There you are," he said softly, stepping inside. "I woke up and you were gone." Emily swallowed hard. "I couldn't sleep. I needed air." "So you came here?" he asked, tilting his head. His tone was still calm, still gentle, but something in it made her feel like prey. Diane moved between them. "She came to see me. Is that a problem?" Daniel looked at his mother, and a muscle in his jaw twitched. "Of course not. I just wish she'd told me. I was worried." He said it like a loving husband. But his eyes were a storm. Emily stood quickly. I'm going home. I'll drive you, Daniel offered immediately. No, she said too fast. I need to clear my head. Diane stepped closer to Emily. Stay here tonight, she urged quietly. Please. Daniel turned toward his mother slowly. Why would she stay here? He asked. Is there something you need to tell me? Silence filled the room, thick, choking. Emily forced a small smile. I'm fine. Really? Daniel reached out and took her hand. His fingers wrapped around hers with a gentleness that felt fake, like a mask slipping over something vicious underneath. Let's go home. Emily hesitated, but the alternative, staying in that house with both of them staring her down, felt unbearable. She followed him out, feeling Diane's terrified eyes burning into her back. In the car, Daniel was quiet. The silence felt louder than any argument could have been. Streetlights flashed across his face, highlighting the tension in his features. Finally, he spoke. What were you talking to my mother about? Emily stared out the window. Nothing important. Try again, he said. His voice had changed. The softness was gone. Every syllable was sharp, precise. We were just talking, she said. About Claire, he asked. Her breath caught. How do you? I'm not stupid, Emily. The rest of the drive was quiet. When they reached the apartment, Daniel locked the door behind them. Not unusual, but tonight it sounded different, a finality to it. He walked to the living room and turned to face her. His expression was calm again, but his eyes glinted with something dark. Ask me what you really want to know, he said. Emily's throat tightened. What happened to her? He studied her face for a long time. Then he smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't touch his eyes. She left. That's not true, Emily whispered. He took a step closer. People leave all the time. All it takes is fear, or mistrust, or someone whispering poison in their ear. Your mother was trying to protect me, Emily said. Daniel stopped walking. The room went still. Then he laughed quietly. My mother loves drama. She always has. She likes to rewrite history to make herself the victim. Emily felt the floor tilt beneath her. That's not what she told me, she whispered. His smile faded. What? Did he tell you? Emily hesitated. And that hesitation, just that split second of silence, was enough. His entire expression shifted. The mask dropped. You think you know me? He whispered. You don't know anything. He stepped closer. She stepped back. He stepped again. She backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. Daniel, she breathed. You're scaring me. Good, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through her like ice. I should have expected this, he continued. You're just like her. Curious. Suspicious. Always digging. Emily shook her head. I just want the truth. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. The truth is whatever I say it is. Fear surged through her. This wasn't insecurity. This wasn't protectiveness. This was control, pure calculated control. And she realized something terrifying. This man wasn't losing himself. He was revealing himself. The next morning, Emily waited for him to leave for work. Waited until she heard the door lock behind him, before grabbing her keys and running to her car. She didn't even take her phone. She didn't want to risk him tracking her. She drove straight to Diane's house. When Diane opened the door, Emily didn't say anything. She collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Diane held her tightly, whispering, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Inside, Emily finally asked, What happened to Claire? Diane sat down, her hands trembling. She tried to leave him, she whispered. And Daniel doesn't handle abandonment well. His father was the same. Dangerous when he sensed someone slipping away. Emily felt a cold sweat spread down her back. Is she alive? I don't know, Diane admitted, tears filling her eyes. I only know she vanished. And my son, he behaved the same way then as he's behaving now. Emily covered her mouth, her whole body shaking. I should have warned you sooner, Diane whispered. But I was afraid of him too. Before Emily could respond, Diane grabbed her shoulders. You need to get out. Not temporarily. Not overnight. You need to disappear. That's what Claire tried to do. She almost made it. The word almost felt like a knife. Emily stayed there for hours planning. Diane gave her cash, a bag, instructions, numbers to call. She offered to come with her, but Emily refused. She didn't want to put Diane in more danger. At sunset, Emily left through the back door, heading to her car. The sky was orange and fading, the air crisp. Every sound made her flinch. She got in, started the engine, and froze. Daniel was standing beside her window. She hadn't seen him approach. She hadn't even heard him. He leaned down slowly, his face calm, his smile soft. "Going somewhere?" he asked. Her blood turned to ice. She locked the doors, but Daniel didn't react. He tapped the window gently. "Open it, Emily. Let's talk." She shook her head violently, tears blurring her vision. His smile widened. "If you don't, I'll make you." Emily hit the gas pedal. The car jerked forward, her hands shaking uncontrollably on the wheel. She didn't dare look back. She didn't breathe until she reached the highway. For hours she drove with no destination except away. But running from someone like Daniel wasn't simple. Not when he had the charm to manipulate, the intelligence to anticipate, and the darkness to follow through. For days, Emily hid in motels, burned her clothes, changed her appearance, stayed off the grid. She lived in constant fear, jumping at footsteps, checking windows twice, scanning every room. Then on the fourth night, she found a note slipped under her door. 3 words. "You can't hide." She collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. She didn't know how he found her. She didn't know how he kept tracking her. But she knew one thing. She couldn't run forever. And that's when she made the choice that ended everything. Not what she wanted, what she needed. She called Diane. "I can't do this anymore," Emily whispered. "I'm tired. I'm scared. I don't want to die." Diane's voice broke. "Come home. I'll help you." But Emily said no. Instead, she asked Diane for something else, something that terrified her even more than running. "I need to confront him," she said. "Not alone, not unprepared. But I need this to end." The plan they created that night wasn't perfect, but it was the only one that gave Emily a chance. The next day, she returned to the house she once shared with Daniel. She sat in the living room with Diane beside her, waiting. When Daniel walked in, his eyes widened in surprise and delight. "There you are," he said softly. "I knew you'd come back." Emily stood, her legs trembling. "I'm not here to stay." His expression hardened instantly. "Of course you are. You belong with me." "No," she whispered. "I belong to myself." Daniel laughed, a cold, broken laugh. Claire said the same thing. And that was it. The truth. Spoken without hesitation. Emily backed away. Diane stepped between them, tears streaming down her face. "Daniel," she whispered, "please stop this." He looked at his mother with that same coldness Emily had seen in the photo, the same terrifying emptiness Claire must have seen in her final moments. "You ruined me," he said softly. "Both of you." He stepped forward and Emily knew she had seconds. She reached into her pocket and pressed the button on the device Diane had given her. A panic alarm connected to a tracker the police had been monitoring. Diane had gone to them the night before, telling them everything. They were already waiting outside. Within seconds, officers stormed the house. Daniel didn't fight. He didn't cry. He simply stared at Emily with an expression she would never forget. An expression that said this wasn't over. But it was. For her. For Diane. For Claire. Months passed. Daniel was charged, tried, and imprisoned. The details never made it fully public, but enough came out to confirm what Emily had feared. He had hurt others before her, controlled them, broken them. Some had escaped. Claire hadn't. Emily rebuilt her life slowly, carefully, like someone rearranging fragile pieces after a storm. Diane became family to her. Broken, remorseful, healing in her own way. They found comfort in each other. And Emily learned something she later told me with tears in her eyes. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like everything you ever wanted. In the end, what saved her wasn't strength. It was listening, really listening, to instincts, to fear, to the voice inside her that whispered, "Run." I think about that a lot, about how many lives could change or be saved if we listened sooner. If we trusted the warnings we try so hard to ignore. Emily survived because she finally listened, and because someone else had the courage to speak, even through guilt and fear. If there's one thing I took from her story, one thing I carry into my own life, it's this. People may hide who they are, but the truth always leaks out in small cracks. And when someone warns you, quietly trembling, afraid, you should listen. Even if it doesn't make sense yet. Even if you don't want to believe it. Especially then. Because sometimes warnings aren't meant to protect your feelings. They're meant to save your life.